I've come to a point where I'm starting to think that skins and cosmetics were a harmful update.
This
At least
event
now
was
seeing
genuinely
what
just
they
the
were
bare
doing
minimum.
with it.
This game is
My
so
friend keeps
boring
telling
and
me,
the devs
imagine if you
somehow
still
quell
listens
listens
to
to
the
the
community.
community.
If you pass gameplay to actual fun gameplay. People keep making videos of fixing gameplay with trinkets that seem more twisted, which makes
I didn't want to have to make this video. I've been trying to ignore the elephant in the room, but I feel like it needs to be addressed now or never, now that the Sprout Tune of the Week update came out. The growing sentiment around the Dandy's Road community has gotten really bad, and I want to talk about it. I am aware that this is kind of like punching a hornet's nest. It's crazy to actually say all these people are being unreasonable, but that's what I'm doing in this video. I don't think the Dandy's Road devs are as bad as people make them out to be, and I feel like this sentiment just comes from people who don't understand how game design works. Which is fine. A lot of these people are children. I don't expect them to be professional game devs. But as someone who likes being positive and hopeful about the games I play, it's disheartening to see the community fall into such negativity. So hopefully, my explanation on why I'm still trusting the devs will allow some people to see a brighter side to things. Some key disclaimers before I go. Do not harass anyone in this video. In the end, these are just people's opinions, and I think they're allowed to be upset with the way the devs are approaching the game. This video isn't to hate on the people who are dissing the devs, it's just to defend the devs, because I think a lot of the people's points are downright unreasonable for the size and workload of the current team. Also, you don't have to agree with me, but I ask you, if you're a Quell hater, in quotes, that you at least hear me out on this. I'm going to bring up a lot of stuff that doesn't often get acknowledged in the community, and even if that doesn't change your view, that's okay. But please be respectful and hear me out before making up your mind on what you think of my points. If you come away from this video with a more hopeful attitude, great, I'm glad I could help. But if I don't convince you in the end, that's also okay. You're allowed to have your own opinions. I just ask that you're respectful to everyone, especially the devs, since this situation has really devolved into people just being straight up rude to the devs for no reason. Okay, so this sentiment I've seen growing in my comments and in a lot of other Dandy's Road videos kind of boils down to a handful of key points. The game hasn't had a major gameplay update in a long time, which means the devs are lazy. The game has been adding a lot of skins lately, which means their priorities are out of whack. The events are kind of repeats of each other, and Quell doesn't listen to the community. So let's go through these points one by one, and I'll explain why I think they're flawed views that don't take into account everything that's actually going on. The devs are lazy because of no gameplay updates. This point is the most reasonable to me. I think it's fine to be upset that the game hasn't had any big, major gameplay changes since Dial's Floor getting added almost 9 months ago. And yeah, this is kind of a bad thing, and I completely agree with people getting frustrated on this. I feel like the people who say there hasn't been any gameplay updates because the devs are lazy or they're focusing on skins are kind of missing the point. Because we already know the reason the devs haven't made any major gameplay changes in a while. And we've known it for months, actually. It's not a new thing. Shortly after Rox was fired due to the grooming allegations, Quell came out with a statement.
I had a discussion with an associate yesterday on a few developer options. I like being transparent with the community and how things are going. I've been looking through Rox's old code, and well, there's more if statements than I remember, and some code that could be running a bit better. So I'm actually looking to attempt to get us all a professional coder in the Roblox space. I want the best I can afford to ensure there can be improvements to everything. I'm also looking for someone with the possibility of console support to get that running sooner. I believe looking at everything, we will not get a Halloween update, but instead focus to fixing the current code in a way that could allow it to be working better. No, I'm spending many hours to ensure things are right. Hope this update helps some of you understand where I am currently in processes and thoughts.
A few months later, during that patch that fixed Pebble being basically impossible to escape in the Squirm update, the update notes had a little explanation in it.
System overhauls. Many of you noticed that something felt different about Twisted Pebble over the past couple of weeks, and you were right. Our last update log mentioned many back-end improvements to drive better performance, but the truth is, that was a pretty big understatement. Over the past 6 months, The team rebuilt the Twisted AI system, the stats system, and several other core systems from the ground up. We wrote it out quietly because we wanted to make sure everything was stable before talking about it, and your feedback on Twisted Pebble's behavior helped us dial things in, including today's adjustment to bring him closer to how he felt before. So, why rebuild all of this? Because the old systems had taken us about as far as they could and had held a lot of tech debt. These new systems unlock a lot for us and the player base moving forward, including better netcode, significant improvements to gameplay feel, even for high ping connections. Granular twisted tuning. We now have much finer control over individual twisted behaviors, which means more precise balance adjustments and more very twisted behaviors. More complex abilities. The new architecture lets us build more complex, twisted and tune abilities that weren't possible before. Better performance across the board.
And of course, there was a recent devlog where Quell literally said it point blank, and people still don't get it.
Recently, the coder spent a lot of time rebuilding the entire Twisted AI script. This went live around the Squirm update, and with this change, we can add so many more interesting mechanics and personality to our Twisteds. Twisted Squirm was the first to fully take advantage of this new code. Though we hope to not just improve the Twisteds, as the coders have also been working hard towards redoing code across many aspects of the game, like machines, tunes, stats, and overall UI. I know a lot of you have been waiting for more gameplay content. These improvements to the code, while not directly new content for you, were necessary to help Dandy's World be set up for a long-term success. Optimizing the code gives us opportunities for unique mechanics and more room to add to the game at a quicker pace. We've been dedicating lots of time to improving the back end of the game, and we plan to have all of this wrapped up in this year, hopefully. Once we leave Alpha, the game will be sent into version 1.0 with a big update with tons of new gameplay and lore that is already being worked on. I want to thank you all for remaining patient with me and the team while we work hard to get there.
Gameplay updates have slowed down because the developers have shifted focus to work on optimizing the core pieces of the game. It's not that they're lazy, it's just they have more important things to worry about right now. Optimizing the game is an extremely important task to be done before the game leaves alpha. And yeah, that's gonna leave us with very few gameplay updates in between as a consequence for that. You can have your own gripes about this approach, but I personally think it's completely reasonable to prioritize optimizing the game. A well-coded game is easier to update later on, not to mention the features have less of a chance to be buggy on release, and the game will run smoother on more devices. If the game prioritized more and more gameplay and never optimized itself, we might end up with a yandere simulator situation on our hands eventually. And if you weren't there for Yansim, it basically had the same problem of if statements bringing the game's performance down massively. It was fine at first, when the game was small, but as it grew larger and larger, the game started running awfully, and it was barely able to run in a lot of PCs. And if you're thinking, well, why can't they work on gameplay and optimize? That's also a highly reductive way to look at it. The devs can only do so much. There's not that many of them, and it's not like it's a massive studio that can split their coders like that. And if you think it's as easy as them just hiring more devs, it's not as simple as that usually. Search up Brooks Law and read the wiki page on it if you're confused about this. And also, a good analogy I have for this, the core code of the game is the foundation, and the gameplay updates would be the house on top of the foundation. Months ago, the devs noticed that the foundation was kind of faulty and could use some better materials. So since the house wasn't too built yet, only a couple of pillars, they started taking down the foundation to replace the broken beams with more strong reinforced beams. But now that the foundation is taken down again, they can't exactly start building a house before they're done reinforcing it, or else the house will just crumble again. If they focused on both optimizations and gameplay updates, there's a good chance the optimization code changes would completely break the new gameplay changes constantly, since the gameplay would definitely rely on the game's core code, and then the devs would waste even more resources bug fixing it constantly. Remember that update that completely broke the twisted pathing and some of them just couldn't move? Imagine that, but on a much bigger scale, since we'd probably have a handful more gameplay updates by then. It's just more resource efficient to focus on optimizations, get them out of the way as fast as possible before finally moving on to doing something big with the game itself. And while it's true that it does leave us in a bit of a drought, it's still a reasonable approach. And it'll definitely be better for the game in the long run. Not to mention, Quell said they've been reconstructing the game's very core features. Machines, stats, and twisteds, they were all things she mentioned as being recoded from the ground up to run better. We might not feel the difference, but the coders programming the future updates definitely will. The Twisted AI changes prove the devs now have more knobs to work with to make Twisteds more complex. This doesn't just affect the Twisteds they're updating through Tune of the Week, but also makes it so future Twisteds and tunes can have better and more complex abilities, like Squirm with his bookshelf mechanic, or Coco with her jumping. You can definitely still be upset there haven't been big gameplay updates. I'm not saying you can't be upset. I think it's reasonable to not like the fact that we don't have gameplay. But I don't think attacking the devs for knowing where their priorities lie is a constructive way to critique the game. And honestly, even if they've been optimizing the game, they've still been working on little gameplay shakeups as much as they can. Bobette's buffs, Ginger's rework, Iced Over floors, Twisted Coco's jumps, Twisted Bassie's new ability, and Spring Fever's, they were all stuff that they didn't have to do, but they still put some time aside to give us a little something during the events to keep us entertained. And while it is a bit hit or miss, I didn't like Spring Fever's, and Iced Over floors were pretty divisive overall, I don't think people are appreciative enough that they're at least trying to give us something with the small amount of resources they probably currently have. I'm not saying to lick their boots at every opportunity, I am also critical when there's problems, but let's try to be reasonable instead of expecting the devs to squeeze blood from a stone. They keep adding skins. Now to the point about the skins. This one always baffled me. People always paint it as if the devs are actually having to make a choice between making cool features or adding skins, and it's ridiculous. It borders on straight up just making shit up to prove your point, because clearly people who make this point don't actually know how game development works. So let me make this super clear. The devs that program new features are not the same devs that make skins. Making 3D models and drawing designs is a completely different set of skills, and Quell has definitely hired people who specialize in one or the other. Of course, there's people like Quell herself who does a little bit of both, but I'm fairly certain Quell wouldn't have hired people who need to split their attention. Like, instead of hiring 12 people who can do both, it's more efficient to hire like 9 programmers and 3 skin makers or something. And if you think I'm making this up, here's an image of Quell herself saying exactly that.
Hi, so this would make sense from an outsider's POV, but the optimization have most of their models done. We're more waiting on animation work. Different people on a team do different things in their skill set. These 2 skins do not take a large chunk of time from the content schedule. That's why I plan to add them. They're a neat addition. Simple, really.
So yeah, this point is one of the ones that I think are just straight up unreasonable. And I'm not even gonna say like, oh, it's okay for you to feel this way. No, just straight up, you're wrong and being unreasonable. Skins are just a fun thing to help spice up the sparse updates that the art team can work on the side while the main programmers get the optimizations finished up. If you don't like them, then just don't engage with them. They don't interfere with development time and are just fun things for people who enjoy them to collect. There is absolutely no reason to be this hateful towards skins that are just meant to be fun. The events are repeats of each other. The events are also a point people always bring up, how they're just the same formula, just for 3 different holidays. And yeah, I get it to some extent. The events are kinda samey, but I don't think there's much to be done about it, really. It's clear the events are supposed to be secondary content. It's just that since the updates have slowed down for the devs to focus on optimizations, the events came to the forefront. But I'm fairly certain when the optimizations are done, we'll get more gameplay updates, and the events will become more so little bonuses throughout the year rather than the main focus. This point, I just straight up agree with, but I think it won't be a problem in the full release, since events being inherently formulaic also does give us something comfortable and familiar to go back to even when the event is new. And them being simple would make sense for something that is meant to be secondary to the main updates. And for the final point, Quell doesn't listen to the community. This one is the most complex, and while obviously I'm not Quell herself, I've seen so many people paint her as this evil mastermind who hates us, and like, no. That's just bordering on conspiracy theory. But it's true that Quell isn't perfect. I've criticized her before for failing to address issues she promised she'd address, like the RNG-based Golden Quest not being fixed, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that she's maliciously not listening to us. She has listened on multiple occasions, like adding treadmills to help Speedy Tunes have value outside of distraction, increasing rare twisted odds when people complained in the Squirm update, nerfing Pebble when he became almost impossible to avoid after the twisted AI changes. Now, were they perfect solutions? That depends on who you ask. I personally think the treadmill machines didn't actually accomplish their mission statement, and the rare chance changes really messed with long runs. But overall, Quell is really trying her best to listen to the community. Her approach isn't always the best, and she sometimes doesn't make the best decisions, but she's only human, and of course we all mess up sometimes. Like when she promised the RNG would be reduced, but then forgot or something. I think it's fair for you to at least mildly dislike Quell for her poor handling of a few things. But a lot of the hate is really insane and childish. Which, fair, the community is full of children that just parrot what the big YouTubers say, so I can't blame them exactly. They're just young. Not to mention, with the amount of vitriol in the community right now, with a lot of people genuinely giving unhelpful critiques and just being downright rude, I don't blame Quell for not listening to you guys often. You act like she's invulnerable, but she's a person. And seeing so many posts and comments full of hate and anger directed at her probably upsets her a lot, and it isn't good for anyone's mental health, especially when the critiques aren't even very good to begin with a lot of the time. Not saying that all the critiques are not good, it's just that a lot of them are not good. So, yeah, this is kind of my thoughts on this whole situation, explaining why I'm not as pessimistic as some other content creators on this topic, and maybe helping you see the situation from a different, more optimistic perspective. Again, it's okay if you don't agree with me in the end. But even if you don't, thank you so much for still hearing me out. And I'm hoping we can still be respectful towards each other even if we disagree on this. Overall, the situation is kinda messy. A lot of the stuff being shared around is just downright hateful. It's still kinda shocking to me how many people didn't realize there was optimizations going on until Quell mentioned it in the devlog when we've known for months. I don't even think there's the argument of, well, people don't read her Discord messages. And well, we also had that in the changelogs. Do you guys not read the patch notes to know what the devs are adding and talking about? They often say important stuff in there. It's a very useful piece of text to read before experiencing a new update. So yeah, I hope this video helped you be more informed on the situation and also form your own opinions on it, removing any bias, since you can listen to both sides better now. Not many people actually do come to the defense of Quell, and I think this video might do bad because of it. But even if it does, I think that's fine. I said what I had to say, and I spoke my mind, as I promised I would in all of my videos, and I leave you with that. Do leave a like if you liked it, and subscribe if you want. Join my Discord to hang out, and maybe join runs with me. And as usual, thanks for listening to me yap about Dandy's Roll once again. Goodbye.